Hello, Dr. Crone here. In this video, we're going to explore the three different political frames of reference. By the way, this video is important for answering one of the essay question prompts in your next writing assignment. The three frames of reference can be thought of as lenses through which people view politics. Just like colored lenses in glasses make things around you look slightly different, these frames of reference color the way people look at politics. If you're a Democrat and a liberal, you see political events differently than if you're a Republican and a conservative. Two people may learn about the same event and come away from it with very different conclusions based on their frames of reference. Partisanship is the most basic and important of the three frames of reference. Test yourself. How would you answer the question on the slide? Generally speaking, do you consider yourself a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent? The way you answer this question is what political scientists call your party identification, which is also known as partisanship. Partisanship is an incredibly important political frame of reference for most people. It's an emotional attachment to a party. I like to compare it to being a sports fan. My attachment to the Pittsburgh Steelers is visceral and emotional. It's not based on logic or thought. I learned to cheer for the Steelers when I was a young kid in Pennsylvania. Partisanship is like that. It's generally long-term and mostly stable. In other words, it doesn't change very often throughout a person's lifetime. It's usually acquired when you're a teenager or a young adult. As we'll see in the textbook, it's often influenced strongly by your parents, especially if they had strong political views themselves. Sometimes partisanship can change for an individual, but usually there has to be a pretty big political upheaval to cause this. The younger you are, the more likely your partisanship is to change in response to big political events. Partisanship is not the same as vote choice, but it influences vote choice. For example, a Republican might decide on occasion to vote for a Democrat, but that will feel to the Republican like an exception to the general rule. Partisanship affects how we see political events through what's called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is a psychological mechanism. In fact, you might have heard about it in psychology class. Confirmation bias leads us to pay attention to things that fit our worldview and to ignore or dismiss information that goes against our worldview. This is why a Democrat, Independent, and Republican can watch the exact same political speech and hear and remember different things. This chart shows the changes in the number of Americans in the different partisanship categories over the past 30 years. Several trends are evident here. First, we've seen significant growth in the number of independents, that's the green line, in this country. That shows that the two political parties have less influence over voters than they used to. Second, we see that the number of Republicans, which is the red line, is usually less than the number of Democrats or independents. There have only been a few years when it's risen above the blue line. In fact, the trend of fewer Republicans has been true in the US since the beginning of political polling in the 1940s. Lots of people vote Republican, but not as many identify themselves as Republicans. What other trends do you notice in this chart? The second frame of reference is ideology. You can see on this slide the textbook definition of ideology. It's a consistent pattern of opinions on particular issues that stems from a core belief or set of beliefs about the proper size and role of government. Ideology is very different than partisanship. It's a logical, not an emotional attachment. It's a logically consistent intellectual pattern of thinking. Not everyone has an ideology. In fact, the majority of Americans don't have a consistent ideology. Ideology starts from a general preference for a certain size and type of government, and then political opinions are directly derived from that. Like partisanship, though, ideology is long-term and relatively stable, and it's usually acquired in young adulthood. This slide lists the different types of ideologies that are active in US politics. For example, liberal ideology actually has two different aspects to it, social liberals and economic liberals. Similarly, with conservatives, there are social conservatives and economic conservatives. Many true liberals and true conservatives share both, but not all. There's also two minor ideologies, libertarian and populist, that are impacted in the United States. Your textbook goes into a lot more detail about them. Here on this chart, we can array the four ideologies along two intersecting spectrums based on two very different types of belief about the proper role of government. The left-right spectrum deals with beliefs about the proper role of the government in the economy. In other words, whether the government should intervene in the economy or not. On the right side of this economic spectrum are those who believe the government should mostly stay out of economic regulation and leave the economy up to the free market. Both conservatives and libertarians share this belief. On the other side of the left-right spectrum, on the left, are those who believe the government should have a role in regulating the economy to protect consumers and to provide economic assistance to those living in poverty. Both liberals and populists believe this. A lot of times we think of left-right as the only spectrum of traditional ideology, but that's not true. The top-bottom spectrum is also important, and it's about social issues or morality. At the top of the spectrum of government intervention and morality are people that believe that the government should take an active role in promoting traditional American morality. This is usually aligned with Christian morality. It includes limits on abortion, drug use, marriage and sexual behavior, etc. Populists and conservatives share these beliefs. People at the bottom of the spectrum believe the government should stay out of issues of morality and leave those choices up to the people. Both liberals and libertarians share these beliefs. From this chart, you can see that while conservatives and libertarians have a lot in common in their ideas about the economy, they have opposite beliefs about the government role in morality. Now that you know more about these ideologies, do you think there's one that fits your beliefs? Why or why not? Our final political frame of reference has to do with demographic group orientations. This slide lists the type of social groupings that matter in today's political environment, such as religion, race, social class, occupation, sexual orientation, and age. Group orientations matter in politics because people in the group often share some kind of common political problem or political belief. For example, women may feel differently about issues of childcare, family leave, or equal pay than men do. Evangelical Christians often feel differently about abortion, for example, than secular individuals. Farmers have strong common economic interests that are not shared by professors or plumbers. Political parties and individual politicians understand these important group differences, and they tend to pitch their campaigns towards the groups they need to win elections. Of course, a candidate can't win by just appealing to farmers or just appealing to evangelical Christians. Instead, the parties try to stitch together coalitions of groups in order to succeed. This table lists the current social groupings that are within each party's coalition of voters. For the Democrats, African Americans, women, Jewish, Buddhist, or Muslim folks, people who have no religion or secular people, Hispanics, people with higher education, people who live in urban areas, and people who live on the East Coast or West Coast of the country are more likely to be Democrats than Republicans. On the Republican side, evangelical Christians, Mormons, men, older people, white people, non-Black Southern people, rural people, people living in rural areas, and the Mountain West, meaning the non-coastal West. These are states like Montana, Utah, places like that. Those people in those categories are more likely to be Republicans than to be Democrats. So you can see race, ethnicity, gender, religion, social class, and region all play a role in today's politics. People in these groups tend to see their party and candidate favorably since the candidates reach out to and appeal to their group. This makes another kind of lens to see politics with. We've come to the end of our video on the 3 frames of reference. Before you turn it off though, take time to list 3 takeaways you remember from the video and then reflect on your own experience with these frames of reference. This work will help you to respond to the discussion board this week and will also help you in your next essay assignment. Good luck.